I'm muted, sorry. We're now ready to start. Okay, so I'm just going to. What was I doing? Dash. Why can't I see? Sorry. Share screen. There it is. Okay. Okay, and welcome to our session 11 of the Sector 39 2023 Permaculture Design course. We've been framing the trajectory of this, the narrative of this, around David Holmgren's 12 principles. And for me, I think it's a very useful way to think about permaculture, because it takes you through a process, and it's very much a step-by-step process. This design idea. So yes, it starts with its ethics. I think if we can agree about our long-term goals, we can come together as groups of people and be very strong. And it's from this mutual understanding that strength comes. We are all facing many challenges in the world. We can't solve them alone. We are obliged. We're stronger. We flourish more if we can come together as with other people, and also then begin to more deeply understand our relationship with the resources that we use, that come and are a product of a healthy natural environment. There's no scarcity in nature. Nature's abundant, unless we mistreat it and run down the natural capital. So permaculture is about restoring that natural and social capital, which has been so heavily eroded into. That's why we need permaculture. So we've taken you on this process. We said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's how we see things, how we interpret things, asking questions, using our intellect, our senses to gather information and to understand. That we build strategies to catch and store energy, information, knowledge, resource, rainwater, build soils, understanding the importance of biodiversity and the relationships that come from that, catching and storing energy. Whilst we're doing that, we're working to build strategies that help meet our needs, yields that nourish us, housing, but also community, and we're also within permaculture encouraged to think of how we nourish every part of a system. Not just thinking about ourselves, but realize that we're part of something that's bigger than ourselves. Which leads us into thinking about systems, how actually in ecosystems everything's kind of connected to everything else, and a change in one place actually can affect the whole system, and which asks all sorts of questions about how do we build relationships, how do we deal with all of this complexity that is within the natural world and our relationships with it. And one of the things that we talked about there was how actually, as we interact with the natural world, as we observe and interact, we get feedback, we get information coming back, which we can work with and use. It's informing us, and we need to allow that to guide us. So we say it's very important that we accept feedback and understand that nature has limits. As we approach those limits, it starts to sort of speak to us. So there's big warnings about climate change, big warnings about deforestation, topsoil loss. These are feedbacks coming from our world to saying that we need to modify our behaviors. We need to receive this information. So the last couple of weeks we've been using and valuing natural resources and services. Last week we thought a bit about energy, about how we've built an economy and a society that is reliant on this one-off form of stored carbon, fossilized carbon, coal, gas, and oil, and which is also toxifying our environment. So it's a one-off, and it's poisonous. We need to maybe reevaluate our relationship to the natural world and understand that we can live on a solar income, that we can live on the energy that's flowing in that is totally sustainable, truly sustainable, the same way that natural ecosystems do. We talked a bit about thermal mass. We talked about proper combustion of wood and for cooking. We understood that if we can design buildings, once you understand how warm air rises and cold air is heavier and falls, we can design buildings to be self-cooling or self-heating just by controlling the airflows, controlling the passive solar gain, and understanding our relationship to energy flows around us. Okay, so these ideas and ways of thinking open up huge new vistas of responsibility, of opportunity, and of possibility. Sorry, and and as we move further, into the PDC, we're gonna, I want you to see more and more examples and begin to think about how we can work with these ideas and apply them, use them for ourselves. So we're on session 11, and that 11 brings us into principle 6. And welcome, Gerald. I'm going to make you co-host as well.
Yes, Steve. Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone.
Hi, good to see you. We're just warming up, so you've missed nothing.
Oh.
I was just saying, so session 11, we're now moving into principle 6, waste not, want not. And the more I think about it, the more I think there's such a, that the relationship between 5 and 6, almost like two sides of the same coin. The more we use and value natural resources and services, the more we build cyclical systems that eliminate waste. So it's sort of like, so it's the application of these things. And I think here's another way to think about waste in nature, there's no such thing as waste. Everything somehow is part of an endless cycle. Hence the earthworm as the icon, to think about how, actually elements, think about just molecules are being exchanged all the time between plants, the air, the soil, going through insects, going through birds, going through animals. They're only cycling. And as permaculture designers, our challenge is to hold elements in that cycle and build strategies to accelerate. If we want to make a system more productive, all we need to do is to make the elements that it's made out of cycle more efficiently and with a greater speed and in a more complete way. And just simply by building and putting those strategies in place, then our whole system becomes more abundant. So your opportunity lies in the waste stream, the things that other people fail to value and fail to see the opportunity in. Maybe a slightly difficult piece of land, or a building that people don't know how to use anymore, or or just the trash in the street. Is it organic? Can we set up systems to capture and store it, to compost it, to build it into living systems. So we're gonna look at a few different things and today, but I'm going to start off with an energy one, and it's quite a sort of it's a good foundational idea. Is I want to talk a bit about anaerobic digestion, and I think it's a good way of getting ourselves tuning in on this theme. So hopefully you can see that clearly. And again, is to say all of these resources that we're looking at today have been placed on the Academy, Sector 39 Academy website, and there's a page specifically for today's lecture, and of course I'll be putting the video there as well. So anaerobic digestion, energy from waste. So let's take this word waste and kind of scrutinize it a little bit. What do we mean by that? Something that has no use, has no purpose, has no function, something we want to get rid of. Really, our challenge is to realize that there is no such thing as waste. Let's call it resource. So it's about finding, the right place for that resource to go. Now, we talked a little bit about human manure last week, I think, and we talked a little bit about composting toilets. That the reason that we want to distance ourselves from our feces is because if they're not managed wrongly, it can smell very bad, and obviously there's pathogens. There's the danger of passing on diseases and parasites and so forth. When you compost something, all of those things are all of the potentially smelly gases are all adsorbed into the carbon, and all of those potential disease-causing organisms are broken down in the composting process. So it's about, once we understand the biological processes and we can manage them in an understanding way, then, hey, it isn't waste anymore, it's a resource. And we've talked so far about aerobic composting and how the kind of composting as gardeners, what we want to do is we want it to be fully aerobic. That means lots of oxygen, which means that we have oxygen breathing aerobic microorganisms. That's what we want. That's very, very useful in our growing systems. And you might remember when we talked a bit about evolution earlier on, we said there's kind of three types of, in terms of biologists, you see the sort of three types of organisms. There's bacteria, there's archaea, and there's eukarya. So the eukarya are the complex multicellular organisms, including us. Bacteria, we know about the bacteria, that's what's in our, many of those are aerobic, but then there are these archaea. There's these very strange type of organisms, many of which are anaerobic, and which means that they can survive in a carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere, and through their respiration, they often produce methane. And methane, of course, is a combustible gas which we can use for cooking and heating and other forms of energy. Let's look at a schematic, a diagram for a very simple idea of what an anaerobic digester might look like. But let's take it just a little bit step further, is let's just say this, that the biology of an anaerobic digester, that is the same as the biology of a cow. So here's an interesting thought, is cows can't really digest grass. We see them eating grass all the time, but actually they can't digest cellulose. Mammals can't digest cellulose. So what they actually have to do, camels have quite cows have quite a complex stomach with different sections, compartments, and they eat the food, the grass in the field, and then later in the day they regurgitate it, they bring it back up again, and they chew it again, break it all down because they've got to crush all that, break down that cellulose, then they swallow it down again, where it ferments in the rumen, in the part of the stomach which is occupied, inhabited by these anaerobes, these methane generating anaerobic bacteria and organisms. And that's why cows belch. When they belch, there's a lot of methane comes out. So that's a negative side of cattle farming. Anyway, let's just think about now. So the cows are eating biomass. That biomass is going to the stomach. They're chewing it, breaking it down, and then they're fermenting it. And then those microbes are breaking that down even further and making then a digestate, a product that is digestible to the cow. So the cow needs to team up with these anaerobic microbes to be able to actually digest its food. So there we go. And if we then capture the cow manure from our livestock, capture that fresh manure, it still has not been fully digested. The efficiency of the digestion is not 100% within the cow. There's still a lot of energy left in that cow manure, and that's why it makes good compost. So in an anaerobic digester, we're going to mix cow manure with water, and we're going to make a nice, clean, without lumps, smooth, kind of porridge consistency, so we can pour it in. And you can imagine that you're seeing this 3D kind of a barrel. So we have an inlet pipe. And what you'll notice is that, and this is the level of the liquid inside the tank. So, and let's just say every day, or maybe morning and evening, we're going to add a bucket of cow manure that's been mixed with water for a nice consistency, fresh. And in we put our bucket, so that as we put in that bucket of cow manure, the level inside the tank is going to go up, isn't it? And so there's a bucket's worth of this slurry, of this digestate, is going to come out of this end. So we're going to have another bucket this end. So we put a bucket of manure in, and we get a bucket of digestate out. And the volume of one displaces the other. It needs to be warm. In some countries, they have to put biogas units underground, or even have to heat them. Use some of the methane to maintain the temperature. In the tropics, in Uganda, you don't need to do that. It's warm enough. So what is the key is to maintain a really good environment to suit these microbes. That's the engine of the system. And you don't want this tank to fill up with grit and stones and particles and sticks and things that are going to sort of clog it up. So in a perfect world, we'd have lovely, nice consistency, fresh cow manure going in, and we do. And again, is for this fermentation to be happy, to be optimal. What's good is if we can maintain the same conditions. So what we don't want to do is to forget about it for a few weeks and then come back and throw a whole load in. That's not so great. The best way to do it would be, let's say, a bucket in the morning and a bucket in the evening, a regular feed, a regular process. So, and we're putting in the cow manure. Inside here, it's being digested. The byproduct of the digestion is it gives off biogas, methane. We can have a floating top section to our biogas digester, and And then we can take the gas off on a pipe and send it to stoves and lighting, however it is we're going to use it. And we've then got this output of the digestate, of organic fertilizer outflow. So what's coming out of it isn't really very much different from what the cow was digesting and enjoying when it was eating that biomass before. So this is full of it's full of like yeasts and other nutrients, and can be used very usefully as an organic fertilizer. So we're eliminating waste, and we're also getting the highest value use from the waste, because we're separating off, we're getting the gas, and we're doing some useful work with the gas and the digestate. We're sending that to also where it can be most usefully used. Many of you may have seen, I certainly have seen systems, sort of underground systems. I have actually seen a really system standing on the ground in a big polyethylene tank. That's highly possible. This is a system of 2 chambers which are underground, and that might give us a really long-term stable temperatures. So there might be an advantage of that. And then, of course, we can build a sort of a brick cylinder under the ground and then fill it back in again. We've got a very robust unit. We have our inlet, so there we go. That's where we're going to add our input. And again, so with a kind of regularity and with a constant pattern to it. And again, is as we add more new material in, that's going to displace the spent material, and we can then have a system then for extracting and accessing that slurry, which we can use elsewhere. And again, we see here's the gas coming off. And a limiting factor, a consideration with underground built brick systems is, if at some point the system breaks down, dries out, you might go for a period where you're not using it, is you've then got to get inside, dig it all out, and start all over again. So access is a consideration, and to say is, and it's hard to run these systems long period of time without some sort of build up of grit and other particles sort of coming into the tank. So we have to, an advantage of the above ground system is you can literally pull the 2 halves apart and wash them all out, start again. Underground system can be a little bit more tricky, but it's the same principle, and you can find the designs for these, and again, installation cost varies on the size of the application, and you want to consider how much you want to use it. But as we go into this a little bit, so there we go. There's the principle. I've explained really sort of the biology of it, how it works, and then here we're seeing this is a very common designed, constructed system that we might see. There indeed is someone building one, and we can see how strong that can be, and how a well constructed tank could supply a community. Clearly, there's a relationship between the amount of feedstock you're putting in, the amount of gas that you're going to get out, and the size of the system that you're going to design and build. So, like with all renewable energy systems, you want to have a good idea of the end use. How many households are we trying to cook for, or light, or are we sending this methane to an electrical generator? But to have a clear sense of the load that's required, and then designing it to designing the system to suit the required need. So I found this picture on the internet. This is how we eliminate waste, is we construct cyclical systems. So look, here's our organic waste harvest. Here's the plants we're growing as our crops, our fodder, the things that we maybe gathering in, or we're growing for animals, or we've purchased in feed. We don't want to waste any of this. So some of it we might want to save for aerobic composting for other reasons. And but here's our biodigester, and we can think about very much here's our organic waste harvests. We can process through animals. We've got pigs, cows, and chickens. Here's the manure going to the system. And it's also suggesting here that we can send human feces, human manure through that system too. And I've seen schools, certainly Basoga for one, where the school toilets power, but also contribute to a biogas system. I'll talk about that in a minute. Let me talk about it now. You can put all sorts of different things into these systems, and they will break down, and they will give you the methane, give you the biogas. For them to work really well, they run best on cow manure. And if you've got a good fermentation going on in your tank, you can throw in pretty much anything else, and that will also get fermented, and it'll work. So you can put your human waste in there, and you can be confident that the system's going to function well, and you're not going to have any problems with pathogens. Where the school had found they had a human manure-driven system, but the problem was the school holidays, the vacations. There were times when there weren't kids there. There wasn't enough people there to maintain that fermentation, so it would dry out, and then it would get used again, and then it would not work properly, and it would smell, and and then problems come. So I can't stress enough. It's about you got to keep this fermentation bubbling away nicely, and you've got to understand the right mixture between the water and the manure going into it. Once you've got that going well, then you can start throwing in other things, food waste and crop residues and human waste. But again, stressing, it slowly will fill up with grit and soil particles and things like that if you not managing that well. So all of those considerations. But these systems can be fantastically, they can work really, really well. Yeah, and look at, so those are our inputs. Our inputs are waste. It doesn't have to be clean water, and it could be washing water, grey water, feces, urine can go in there, animal deposits. Get a good fermentation, and out comes really a lot of methane, and you can use that for cooking, you can use it for lighting, you can compress it and store it as a biogas. It could be saleable, or you could put it into some kind of an engine, into a generator, and turn it into electricity. And of course, here's our other output: is the digestate. The so call it slackage in here, effluents of the digester. We send and we send these back to feed our growing systems, and we can actually include it into animal feeds as well as into preparations for improving soils. So this is a great way of getting us into the mindset of thinking about produce no waste, understanding that any resource handled in the right way and the right system can become a very, very important and contributing factor to our whole system. I was interested to see this in some people that are actually bottling and selling their digestate. Think about how we can turn something of very low value into something of very high value. Again, something which we're very interested in permaculture, finding the highest value use for a resource, and understanding the appropriate way to use them. So this is the abstract, the synopsis from an article, a research article into the use of biojet, into the use of this digestate as a fertilizer. So I just dropped onto this slide. I'll read it through, but again, it's there to download. So biogas digesters convert waste matter into a natural gas-like fuel and a nutrient-rich digestate byproduct. This digestate has the potential to be used as a soil amendment to benefit crop production with or without biochar, a purported nutrient sponge. In a greenhouse study of several crop species, the effects of digestate fertilization on crop growth, photosynthetic efficiency, vegetable production, and chemical nutrient levels were tested. Results indicate that results indicate that increasing potency of the applied digestate fosters higher growth and fruit production rates on several studied plants, but to a lesser degree than a conventional fertilizer. More potent digestate application increases antioxidant capacity, total phenolics content, and ascorbic acid levels in kale compared to the control chemical fertilizer test groups, but has confounding results on legume nutrients. Additionally, the combined application of biochar and biogas digestate added to compost and used as potting media positively impacts crop germination. This work has relevance to agrarian communities that could benefit from recycling livestock and food waste into fuel and a renewable fertilizer. So this was a Cambridge University study, and that was their output. So they compared it to using a conventional fertilizer, and they got very good results, not quite as good, but we could imagine there might be many, many other benefits. They mentioned the use of biochar. Now, I've talked about biochar a bit already, and here's a reminder: is if we can make charcoal out of anything that had once grown. If I say charcoal, you think of big lumps of charcoal, maybe that you might use for cooking. Biochar, because we're going to use it as a soil improver or a compost amendment. If we look at this biochar under a microscope at a very high magnification, what we see is it has an enormous surface area. It's lots and lots of little holes, and that can hold moisture. And you can imagine how they might come into contact with the digestate and then create a very interesting aerobic environment for beneficial soil microbes to come in and flourish. And we heard from the study how the use of this inoculator helped with seed germination as well. So these are very interesting areas for us to study and explore, and to understand that we're using biological processes. All we're doing is closing the nutrient cycle. We're stopping potentially damaging gases like methane from escaping into the environment, and we're channeling it back into something that's productive and useful. We're capturing, storing it, and we're using it to produce yield, and we're understanding how it contributes to the overall system. This is a really good way now to think about how this might be an engine for permaculture growing, how we could be really building long-term fertility in the system whilst also having the gas, for cooking, for lighting, for other uses. And yeah, this helps us now think about integrated systems. We achieve principle 4 by using and valuing natural resources and services and producing no waste. Here is this is a study group from Wales, and dear friends Jake and Grace in that picture, and we're there with Mr. Kitembo, our host in Uganda, and we're looking at his home biogas system, and we're just chatting about how it works and so forth, and what you're seeing here as well is, so here is his entry point to put in the cow manure mixed together, which we did. Also on the other side of it, this is the family latrine, and that is also contributing energy, resource, human manure as a resource, and because it's been added to this cow manure fermentation, we're going to have a really good breakdown, and we can be really confident that system's going to work well. So there we go. Yeah. Any questions or thoughts are back about the biodigester? Gerald, you had one at Bawama. How did you get on with that there? And did you kind of concur with what I'm saying about having to keep a regular fermentation?
Yes, absolutely. And just as you explained it, the more consistent it is, the better, because on the other hand also, you don't want the cereal to solidify and block off the system, because it's supposed to be set up in a way that is kind of self-draining. So if you let it solidify, it will be blocking off, and that cereal will not be moving out. Also, the other interesting bit was, I understand is sort of an ongoing study, but apparently if you're feeding the animals on sort of nitrogen dense fodders, the likes of coriander, lucina, and all those, the likely impact is going to be that even the quality of the biogas is going to be good. So that also brings into play another element of the multi-purpose nature of some of the elements. And that translates even at stage 2 of that element's use. Because yes, lucina has been digested by the cow. Ordinarily, that would have been the end of its use, but it shows you that even in the dung state, or even at the point of biogas production, is still having an impact. So it's really interesting, and I think I could talk all day about that.
Thank you for that, Gerald. Yeah, so there's that experience of having lived and worked with one, and so interesting to think about the quality of the manure and the relationship to the quality of the feed that the animal's getting. So that's super interesting. So that's telling us something and think about everything being a cycle, everything is connected. So we grow good fodder and we have healthy animals, we're going to get really good manure, and with that we can drive our systems forward with. So that's that if ever we needed an incentive, it's there.
Oh, sorry,
No,
Steve.
please. Yeah.
Maybe relating to that topic, waste not, want not, or create no waste. It was interesting that from the experience, because we had neighbors who had animals, but apparently they had the cows and all that, but they were basically people we would refer to as pastorists. For them, their interest was basically the cows. So they had them in numbers, and here was a scenario that this dung kept piling up. It was becoming, an issue to them, until we reached out to them, and they were more than happy, even at some points, to provide us with a transport to bring it to our site. So when someone says there is a lot of opportunity in the waste stream, it is, and other people would even fight so hard to get rid of that opportunity. Yes.
That's really interesting, isn't it? So when you don't value a resource, it ends up becoming pollution. And if you don't handle it right, as I said, I think when we talked about water treatment, I said nutrients in the wrong place is pollution. So you got too much cow manure, whoa, that's gonna start giving off that methane into the atmosphere. That's something that's contributing to climate change. And as you say so rightly, you're missing out on that resource. So yeah. Okay. On we go. Valuing waste. Now, I'm also using and valuing natural resources and services, and I don't think it's a tenuous link. You'll get where I'm going with this. Lovely quote from Goethe, who was he Austrian or German philosopher. The hardest thing to see is what is in front of your eyes. So, as we had already in the first principle, was beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The hardest thing to see is what is in front of your eyes. So sometimes we fail to see the obvious. So what you just told me, Gerald, about your neighbours, they had so many cattle, the manure was a problem for them. And so they were just happy to see you, they were failing to see the value of what they had in front of their eyes. I wonder what else we might be failing to see the value of. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to talk a bit about moringa. And this is a tree that can save millions of lives. This is a tree that can energize your productive system. And if we're talking about elements that have multiple yields, we want to build systems made of elements that have multiple yields, because those yields then support a variety of different functions. So let's just think a bit about moringa. The moringa tree, Moringa oleifera. These are the leaves of the humble moringa tree. It is said that it originated in northern India. It is said. What we do know is there's actually quite a few different species, and there was knowledge about moringa in the ancient world. So it's been valued for a long time. Look, we're seeing it in Central America or the Caribbean, West Africa, East Africa. Down it looks like in Madagascar, up in Egypt, Turkey, Syria, India and Tibet, China, Southeast Asia. Here we go, right across the Indonesia, Philippines, moringa. Clearly, it has been valued for a long time by many people, and it seems to be adaptable to a lot of different tropical climates, subtropical climates. Wow, moringa has been used in many, many different ways over time, and in different parts of the world there are different traditions. Africa, Latin America, South America, India, Indonesia, many island nations. It's used in nutrition, disease prevention, as an ointment, for alley cropping, as a fertilizer for erosion control, water purification, cosmetics, textiles, insecticide, fungicide, lubricants, tanning leather or dye, fiber products, fences, ornamentation, shade, a wind barrier, a cane juice clarifier. It can be used for honey production, bees like it, a condiment, a cooking oil. Medicine for anemia, anxiety, asthma, blackheads, blood impurities, blood pressure, bronchitis, catarrh, chest conditions, cholera, colitis, can go on and on and on, malaria, pain in joints, pregnancy. Look, urinary tract infection. As to how effective it is in all of these things, I can't possibly comment. But what we can know is that this plant has many, many uses and has been explored and used in many different ways. And I think that we're instantly getting an insight that it can be, it can be beneficial in so many different ways. So that's the traditional world. Today, in the modern world, scientists are looking at it more and more seriously, and let's see if any of those sort of traditional claims hold true. Nutritional value. Well, research has told us that moringa is indeed extremely nutritious. Maybe 7 times the vitamin C of oranges, or 4 times the vitamin A of carrots. More calcium than in milk, more potassium than bananas, and more protein than yogurt. Just from these tiny little leaves. This is, helps build strong bones, strong teeth, strong bodies, strong immune systems. So this is essential functioning. So it's like growing multivitamins on your doorstep. Vitamin A, B, B1, 2, 3, C, calcium, chromium, copper, iron, manganese, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, protein, zinc. Wow. So it's really, really rare for any plant source to contain all the essential amino acids. So proteins are built out of chains of amino acids, and our body needs to be able to build complex proteins. It needs to have the basic building blocks, what they call the essential amino acids. So you can have lots of some but be deficient in others, and you will have long-term health conditions as a result. Meat is a luxury product and can be expensive. So sometimes plant-based diets can be deficient in key nutrients. Moringa can help address this, and this is, very, very important. If we can have, strong bodies, strong bones, strong immune systems, we get strong people. So this is like a fundamental thing. So we're using and valuing this natural resource, and we're understanding that our ancestors knew a lot about this plant, and we can bring this into our world now. So it's telling us here 2 very, very important amino acids for infants as well. So think about Gerald's point about nutrients translating through the cow into the manure. I think about nutrients translating through the mother into the baby. Good nutrition for the mother obviously translates into good nutrition for the baby. These are very, very important ideas. So we're seeing a comparison with moringa here, but compared to carrots. The fresh leaves, but one having the dry leaves is obviously a more condensed form. Oranges, Oh, here we go. Vitamin C. The vitamin C goes away in the dried leaves. Okay, it's greatly condensed in the vitamin A. So we advantage of having the fresh and the dry. Calcium, iron. Seeing wow, very big comparisons here. The potassium, the protein. These are all essential nutrients for us. And if we're getting those nutrients, and those nutrients are going into our human systems, then those nutrients are going to be in our soil, and they're going to come back to us. This is what we mean by building, having a no-waste system, understanding how things are linked together. So it's known. It has many names. Drumstick tree, the horseradish tree, mother's best friend, the West Indian bean, Ben, Arbolda Ben, Moringa, Ben Alay. You can read it. There we go. Lovely names. I don't see Uganda. What have we got for? Ooh, in Zimbabwe they call it Mupulanga. Tanzania Milongi. Kenya Murongi. Ethiopia Haleko. Sorry, pardon me for my terrible. Anyway, I'm fascinated by this. This is amazing. This really is
You're doing
amazing.
good, Steve.
Yeah.
You're doing good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So here's a map of where there is predominance of malnourishment, and it seems to overlay exactly with the where we can grow and produce moringa. There's a challenge here, and I get it, and I've actually seen quite a few places where moringa's been trendy. It's been a fad at different times. So especially here in the West, is everything's commoditized. So we're always sold things that come from far away, and we're told this is the magic cure for this, but of course we can't grow it. It's got to come from somewhere else. So people have been encouraged in the past, places like Uganda, Tanzania, to grow lots of moringa as an export crop, something that they could dry and make money out of. And all of that is true. But then the marketing machine moves on to the next thing and the next fad. And I think this is way, way too important to think about it like this, that we're just going to grow it as something to send to the West. Now, if it's not in our culture to utilize it, we're not used to eating it or adding it into our food, then that's the question, isn't it? That's the resistance to it. And I think for it to really be useful and functional in tackling malnutrition, we need to really understand its multiple benefits and uses, and have strategies to incorporate that into our diet, our nutrition, beverages, into school meals maybe, or for mothers who are maybe expecting or feeding. We need a plan, not just we need to think about how it's going to become, part of our regular use. So again, consider the possibilities. You can use the leaves for nutrition, for medicine, because it grows fast and it's a good soil builder. They're useful for alley cropping and erosion control. The flowers are a medicine. The pods, the seed pods, are a nutrition and a medicine. The roots have a medicinal use. The seeds can be used for water purification. That you can extract an oil from them. There's a gum, there's a sap which can be used, and the bark has its own uses as well. Like, every part of this plant is useful, and it has many different uses. So can we incorporate it into our designed system where it also does a function like a field boundary, part of our integrated pest management, part of our windbreak system? Think about it. I'm not proposing you go away and do a monoculture of moringa, but what I'm saying is, how do you layer it into your design system, into your garden, into your farm, into your compound, into your community? How would you manage that resource as a group? How would you learn, think about the processes to learn about it? So permaculture takes us beyond. We have to understand this enormous potential, but we need to unlock it, and we need to think about how we can make it relevant, our scenarios and our contexts. This is powerful stuff. And once you have a moringa tree growing, you get lots of seeds. They're very easy to pass on, so we can spread it quickly as well. So look, go back to the whole picture. Is growing moringa is about human health. It's a livestock fodder. You can grow better plants, and then from your livestock you're going to get a biogas, and then you can even feed. If you had surplus leaf matter, you can ferment that too as part of your biogas system. Think about it, how it all links together. Think about it with improved health, we can work more effectively. So we have some feedback from a test in Senegal, where children maintained an increased weight and improved health. Pregnant women recovered from anemia and had babies with higher birth weights. Some research from Nicaragua. Here we see researching the agricultural uses of moringa since the 90s. They've collaborated with the university in Germany and with the Swiss Institute in Zurich. And we have contributions from Sweden. So here's a typical. It's not a huge tree. Here's a typical form that we might see moringa in. Here's another one. Look how well it could sit. It gives a nice bit of shade. It can sit on your edge of your compound. Here it is again. It's a bit older, more established. But we've also been showing that they can be grown as a field crop, and a spacing of only 10 or 15 centimeters. Because the seeds are so abundant, once you have the mother trees, you can almost use it as a green manure. Or you can grow it very densely for the leaves. So the moringa plant's grown as a field crop. They can be harvested frequently. So this will give you a large amount of usable green matter from a very small amount of space. So this is grown intensively, without irrigation, and with very small amounts of fertilizer. He was able to harvest leaves every 75 days, or that's 4 crops a year, 100 tons of green matter in the first year, and 57 tons per hectare in the 100 tons of green matter per hectare in the first year, 57 tons per hectare in the second year. He irrigated the plantation and used large amounts of fertilizers. Okay, up to 9 crops a year. Okay, look, let's stick to our organic methodology. But let's suddenly realize is you don't have to grow it into a big tree where it's going to be difficult to harvest the leaves. We can grow it intensively. This could be fed into animal systems, into human systems, and into bioenergy systems. And we've got a permanent crop because these are perennial plants, they're trees. So using this intensive cultivation plot, look how you've got a rotation, and that we could crop at intervals. If say the green tops grow back 35 to 75 days, so then we think we can see we've got a rotational harvest. We can have almost continuous production. Now, these alleys of moringa that we're growing could also be a field boundary. They could serve other functions. So let's also think about how we could locate these strategically so that it supports other functions on the farm. Here we are seeing using for livestock. increases daily weight gain by up to 32%, increases milk production 43 to 65%. So, yeah, this is feedback from the scientists that we've said, both Feudal and Reyes, experimented with moringa and milk cows. They supplemented with 15 to 17 kilos of fresh moringa leaves daily, and the cattle's milk production increased by 43%. Plant growth enhancer. A plant growth spray. Extract a juice from the green matter, dilute it 36 to 1 in water, and spray 25 milliliters on each plant. So it's relatively simple. It can be done from whatever equipment is available for extracting the juice from the green matter and applying that spray to plants. Here the spray being applied to sugarcane. It's very effective with soybeans, corn, turnips, black beans, red beans, white beans, cowpeas, bell peppers, chia, sunflowers, mung beans, onions, coffee, tea, chili, melons, and sorghum. Hey, I mean, this is versatile. Yeah, we're trying it on fields of vegetable crops. So this is an organic plant stimulator, a growth spray. Here we're seeing it being applied by a tractor. So the observed effect of the spray, according to this study, is it accelerates the growth of young plants. The plants are firmer and they're more resistant to pests and disease. We know this from our research at Trevlack Farm as well, is that the healthier the plant, the harder it is for insects to attack it. And very healthy plants are immune to insect attack. Plants have a longer lifespan, heavier roots, stems and leaves. They produce more fruit, larger fruit, and we're seeing an overall increase in yields. I mean, wow. So here's their observed results. The control obviously being without the moringa spray, diluted 36 to 1. And we're seeing a bigger, fleshier fruit. Here's our sugarcane roots. So the spray even stimulates growth of the plant's roots. Here we're seeing sorghum, turnips, and based on these same experiments, 4,000 cubic meters of methane could be produced per hectare of moringa. That's up to twice as much methane is produced per hectare from sugar beet leaves, a common plant material for biogas. Further experiments are needed to examine the potential use of moringa. So I'm interested in making biogas from the manure of the cows that eat the moringa. I think you're missing out by fermenting the moringa into biomass, into biogas. You may be potentially missing out on a yield. So more studies required: human health, livestock fodder, plant growth enhancer, biogas. Initial studies all look like there's lots of potential. So yeah, share this information, promote field studies and clinical studies in your home, your country, and share your findings with the rest of the world. This is from Trees for Life, and I really want us to get super excited about moringa. And again, this presentation is available on the web page for today's lesson.
Thanks, Steve. Maybe just a little chipping. Imagining how it would be if you would have a biosand filter and combine probably bits of moringa seeds in there. That water would be super I think, super clean. And then even at another point, if we again incorporate the likes of biochar, because we're looking at, integrating rather than segregating. The more elements we're putting together, the more super the process is likely to be.
Especially if we were dealing with, contaminated water, we could layer things, like you say, into your biosand filter, so that because they talked about the seeds being, as you said, helping in water purification. So yeah, how could we? These might combine together very, very powerfully. So these are huge potential areas for further experimentation. I came across that presentation in 2018, so that's a few years ago now. I hope there's been updates and more work going on, but it's really, really exciting. So yeah, I think I will. I'm just going to spend a few minutes. I've got another couple of presentations, but I want to spend a couple of minutes just looking at today's webpage. I put a bit of thought into it, so let's just have a quick look. So you see on the we're at the Sector 39 Academy, and you'll see there's a PDC 23 menu, and there's a page for each of our sessions. So here we are, number 11, eliminating waste. That's where we are currently. And here's a picture of Paul, our brother Paul, there in Kenya with his worm composting bin, and he's converting food waste into a very good worm compost, which gives you a very bacteria-rich compost, which can really boost the fertility of in your veg garden. And he has that at his training hub, so it's something they can interact with regularly. And you get two products when you do worm composting. You get the worm compost, but to prevent it from becoming anaerobic rather, it mustn't get wet, it mustn't get flooded. So the secret is to let that drain. So it needs to remain moist, but we don't want it to become saturated. And that liquor that will trickle off if you gather it comes off as like a black liquor, what they call vermi-wash. So this is vermiculture, that's working with worms. We're converting food waste into compost, and one of the outputs is the vermi-wash. That, again, dilute it down in your watering can, will energize your plants and increase their ability to absorb nutrients, and also add to the nutrient value of the soil itself. So thinking about simple systems that can turn low-grade waste into really high-value inputs for our growing systems. Think about then your moringa waste could also be processed through your worm composter. So think about how we could create multiple beneficial yields just by having a few more, a more informed an idea about how we can work with these biological processes. We've talked about the methane digester, and we've thought about the ins and outs of that. We're now looking at the worm composter, and in between we've had a think about moringa and how we could create really nutrient dense, valuable materials that we can then feed these systems with, and we can integrate that into our gardens, farms and compounds. Lots to think about there, really lots. After our break, which we'll have in a few minutes, I want to go on and look at anti-malarial trees in East Africa, and Also, I want to touch on integrated pest management. I found a resource about the fall armyworm, and I think that was something we need to just check in on. And I put a few little images on here as well. Sometimes they're just helpful to jog your memory, help memorize things. I love coming up with different definitions of permaculture and descriptions. So I've said permaculture is a design system that models on nature. And I've used this as the symbol for principle 8, integrate rather than segregate. And so our permaculture and gardening translates to no bare soil. Keep it covered at all times. Remember that diversity is key. The bigger the variety of plants, the better. And minimum tillage. Digging causes weeds and upsets soil structure. So don't forget, the soil is full of life. So try not to disturb it if you don't have to. Good way of thinking about it. And then thinking about how we can expand our diversity in the garden or into our production by introducing long-term tree crops like moringa, and then understanding how that might actually help contribute to the whole system itself. I want to reference these books if you're ever able to get hold of them. We have shared copies in the past. This is the work of Najma Durrani, and I think she's based at the University of Nairobi, and she is one of the foremost knowledgeable people on the plants of East Africa. And she's written a book on medicinal plants of East Africa, another one on acacias and the whole amazing family of trees and the acacia family, and also one on trees and shrubs. So it's good to be reminded that the knowledge is there. And I know that the new hospital they're building in Kampala, the Aga Khan Foundation Hospital, they're trying to bring together kind of Western medicine, but with more traditional plant-based medicine too. So these are important developments, and it's very important to know that people are recognizing and valuing natural resources and services. These are some images I found earlier today from a compost lecture that we did some years ago. Here we're seeing a tractor with a special implement on it for turning and chopping compost. And what we're seeing is this is how they do it on a bigger scale, what they call a windrow, a long ridge of compost. You don't want your compost heap to get too high because it's going to compress and compact, and the lower levels become anaerobic. We always want to make aerobic compost unless we're doing biogas. So here we're seeing, think about, just see the pattern, see the shape, understand the processes, and think about how you could adapt this. You don't have to have a tractor and a machine. It could be done by hand. We could have teams of people doing it. But thinking about how getting the carbon and nitrogen ratios right and maintaining an aerobic heap, avoiding it from becoming compacted, can produce loads of compost. Or we can compost the resources that we have around us to make sure that we are eliminating waste. But again, try and find the highest value use for that waste. That's what's important. Just burning something is always like the lowest use. Getting energy from heat is always the lowest use. Can we take it higher? So, very important. Aquaponic systems is a very simple schematic of how, again, we could begin to work with our understanding of natural water treatment. Understand that we could have a productive system with fish that are going to produce a nutrient-laden water, which could be circulated via a pump and dribbled across a gravel substrate with a high surface area, where we're growing plants that can extract those nutrients, convert them into a yield, and then return the clean aerated water back to the tank again, eliminating waste by creating an extra yield. Um, here's again Paul at the Perma Africa Centre with his little fish system. So he's got the little baby fish fry in down in the bottom, and the pub circulating the water, which is then coming over the top barrel here, interacting with plants, and then coming back down by gravity, and then trickling so that it has the maximum opportunity to interact with the air and to be reoxygenated. So it's cyclical systems that produce no waste. And understanding the natural functioning of this gravel bed, understand how those microbes operate, and understand how the relationship to the plants, which then clean the water. So we're applying our knowledge to productive systems, creating cyclical systems. Here's the biosand filter. Once we understand the principles of how the biosand filter works, then we can adapt and make it out of locally available materials. But we have to understand how it works first. Here's this young man. This is a group in Natete in Uganda. They're making a biosand filter, and this will be the diffuser plate. There's a layer of sand, as you can see, a column of sand for filtering the water. And when we add new water in at the top, we don't want it to disturb the sand. We want it to trickle in more like a rainfall. So we send it in through this diffuser plate. And let's just have a look. Here's another version of a constructed biosand filter. And here's a kind of the official schematic. I think we were supplied. We've been supplied with diagrams of these before. So there's the diffuser plate. New water coming in mustn't disturb the column of sand. All of this is saturated with water, but the standing water, the resting water, should be no more than 5 centimeters above the surface of the sand. Because the reason for that is because 5 centimeters of water allows oxygen to percolate in and reach the surface to nourish the biofilm. So there's going to be a layer of bacteria is going to form on the surface, and any potential disease organisms, any potential pathogens entering in quickly get eaten, chomped up. And we've got 44 centimeters of sand, 5 centimeters of something a bit optional, ZVI, I don't know what that is, and then we've got coarse sand and then gravel. So we've got at least 60 centimeters of substrate. And again, the same with the biogas digester. If we put a bucket in, or a volume of water in, 2 liters, let's say, 2 liters in, that will travel down here and displace 2 liters out of the spout. So 2 in, 2 out. And we can put in, so look, it's just explaining about the diffuser plate not causing a big splash, and then that water then can rain in and slowly push down. You can see that water entering the top is going to travel down, and that then displaces and pushes out the water from the lower part that's already traveled through the filter. That removes any biological components, removes any physical components, microplastics, grit and dust. All of those things are removed, and clean, potable water comes out of the spout. So we're using and valuing natural resources and services. We can eliminate waste and create clean drinking water from stored rainwater. This is the biosand filter. I made this out of in my backyard, and we use it here at home. I made it out of a refuse bin I bought in the local store. It cost £16, and I bought some plumbing bits. I could have improvised, and yeah, it works very well. Okay, I think I'm going to pause the recording, and let's take a little break. Any other little thoughts? I know I've touched on biosand filters already, but I wanted to bring it back in this context and just deepen our understanding of that, because I think they're amazing. And I think, again, I'm really excited about how these different things might combine together. Gerald, any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Maybe just for the comrades in in Uganda, I know some of them don't even want to hear the sound moringa, because there is a point when it was really like promoted by the government, and at some point it was frustrated, politics back and forth. But politics and all that aside, at least if you put it to use, you make lots of saving, even let's say on medication and all that, and then you'll have a healthier community and family all together. So don't get frustrated.
Yeah,
So
thank you for saying that, because it's very true. It's been one of those things. There's other things too that have been touted around. This is going to be a miracle crop, and you're going to make lots of money, and then the market hasn't quite developed. And then you're trying to export, and then you hit all of those complications about how to market into into a foreign market. It's really difficult. What we want to do is to value that moringa and think about how we could first use it to meet our own needs and think about and not just and nourish the whole system, the farming, agricultural systems or gardening systems that we may be part of. And I think I'm really advocating in that sense. And I'm less of I'm not going to be the guy who's always saying, "Hey, grow this stuff for export." I think that has that opportunity, but it's actually really complicated. I think it was the same with growing shea oil as well. Is that true, Gerald? There's been other little trendy things in Uganda and then they've not been consistent.
Yeah, the likes of moringa, vanilla, and all that, but unfortunately, somehow, other than the global trends and dynamics, you have, the political kind of myopic interventions. So, but as you said, before you think of export and everything, think about yourself, the community, and all your other systems around you. And I've learned also something new about the foliar kind of the spray. It would be interesting to try that out, or to integrate it into the system or into your growing and food system. Because as Steve said, if you're going to talk about IPM, which is integrated pest management, just as it is with human, that the first step to good health is feeding, or the first step to you withering of vectors and all that is to have a good immune system. It's the same thing with crops, that if they are well fed, they are likely to fend off the pests, and probably even Steve will tell you that some of them will have excess sugars that may instead end up just repelling off the pests. So if this is one of them that could improve that, then we should all try it out, or we should incorporate it. In case there is no other question, unless Steve, you have anything else, we could take the break and be back at probably 5 past. That's about 7 minutes. All
Okay.
right.
We'll take a quick break and see you in a few minutes then. Thank you, Gerald.
All right. Thanks, everyone. You don't need to log out for our members. You can stay logged on, just mute, and then after 5 or 7 minutes, we'll be back in. That is at 7 minutes past the hour. See you then.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Yeah, just a reminder that we are, of course, recording this and streaming this on YouTube. And I've logged all of these videos, and they are also linked on a playlist on the YouTube channel. I changed the name of the YouTube channel because I think it was Steve Jones, and I've changed it now to Sector 39 Permaculture as well. So just hopefully that doesn't confuse anyone. But I want it to be about the work and about our vision and the project, and not about me. But when I set it up years ago, I hadn't thought it through. But anyway, now we're up and running. We have our own YouTube channel, and we will catch and store energy and use it to develop yields in true permaculture style. Let me think about. I'm going to talk about, and let me just say, doing this presentation. To you, Stella, I know you've been suffering horribly with malaria, and it's there for everyone. I know. This is a pamphlet, in which the lead author is our friend Najma Durrani, the medicinal plants of East Africa. I'm a big fan of Najma, actually, and I kind of follow her a bit on Facebook and stuff. And anyway, with a bunch of other co-authors. So, common anti-malarial trees and shrubs of East Africa. Now, let's. This comes with a warning. This guide provides an overview of trees and shrubs used as anti-malarial treatments. It is not a handbook for self-medication. The authors and publisher cannot be held responsible for the consequences of course, not a medical manual. We're interested in using and valuing natural resources and services and reducing their waste. And we're interested in integrating these things into our productive landscape so that we can meet our needs, take care of ourselves. We can start to understand there is traditional knowledge to be had and much to be gained. This is also available to download from the Sector 39 website. Malaria is a life-threatening disease caused by Plasmodium parasite that is transmitted through the bites of infected mosquitoes. And in fact, mosquitoes catch it off infected people. So and around half of the world's population is at risk of malaria. And, 140 million cases in 2008. You don't need me to tell you this, I'm sure we all know. The costs are high to people's health, but the disease also results in significant economic losses with, lots of many missed days' work, and also people operating at a non-optimal level because their health is affected. The best way to avoid malaria is to not get it, which is to use a mosquito net, stay out of the way. Use repellents, the aromatic essential oils, including from vetiver, can help repel it. It's reported malaria cases. I don't understand all this data, but there's many more cases reported in Uganda than in Tanzania and Kenya. But the reported deaths in Uganda is much lower, and it's much higher in Kenya. Reporting differences across countries. There are reporting differences, yeah. So anyway, it's a significant threat, and we know that. Species description of anti-malarial trees and shrubs. I thought this was really interesting and just worth us going through. Is Acacia mellifera. So that is we're with our acacia family. We're with this family of nitrogen fixing thorn trees. These are scrub hardy pioneer trees. We know this family. But in the mimosa family, and the mimosas, again, we know them. They're very common, and they're fast growing, nitrogen fixing, can almost be weed trees, and they are good in succession of helping that process of succession and establishment. So we can identify different members of this family. Understand that this is indigenous to East Africa. We have different names. The Swahili name is Kilawata. Yeah, anyway. They will grow. They're easy to propagate. And there is a compound in the bark which has an anti-malarial property. Now, you get rid of malaria, it's to kind of give yourself controlled blood poisoning. So there's going to be an awareness that these things are, you don't want to take too much of it, because you just want to take enough to kill the plasmodium, but not so much as to kill yourself. But this is why we can explore. There are references here. Find out that the traditional knowledge. I'm not going to be the. But look here, we have another one of the mimosa family, Acacia tortilis. Another common one, Mgunga or Mugunga in Swahili. This is a larger tree, up to 20 meters tall, with a flat top, umbrella shaped or sometimes rounded. Also grows as a small shrub or bush. Uses: fuel wood, old timber, poles, edible pods, medicine, fodder, bee forage, shade, ornamental, dune fixation, nitrogen fixing, soil conservation. Come on, why have plants in your we're seeing the same nitrogen fixing for both of these. These are soil building trees that will help filter ecosystem, that gives a background for a source for powerful forms of medicine. And these mimosas have those kind of pom-pom almost that we often see. So they're easy to recognize. You can get to know them. They're all around you. The Albizia amara, another indigenous species, also known as the bitter Albizia. In Luo, they call it Oruga. Have we got a Swahili name? Anyway, yeah. So look, this is a deciduous tree. I think this grows in more arid areas. It is often found along dry rainfall of at least 350 millimeters. It's a wide distribution in Africa, occurring from Sudan, Ethiopia, towards Zimbabwe, Botswana, and even the Transvaal. Mainly growing in sandy woodlands. This is another tree that provides timber for construction and farming, fuel wood, charcoal. The leaves serve as fodder and mulch, assisting soil conservation, nitrogen fixing, and yields a good red tannin, an edible gum, beef forage, and live fence. And then talking about its cultivation and so forth. So look, there's lots in this mimosa family. These are places where we need to look and understand and learn how to identify the varieties that you have around you. Understand all plants have different names, so common names don't always identify the plant. It's good to at least understand the Latin naming system and to help specifically identify plants. But again, large deciduous tree, flattened canopy, 50 meters high, trunk up to 75 centimeters in diameter. Timber, furniture, fencing, utensils, beehive, fuel wood, boat building, medicine, fodder, bee forage, forage, mulch, nitrogen fixing, soil conservation. The leaves of Acacia gumifera quicken the ripening processes of bananas. Well, with multiple functions. See how we can construct landscapes, how we could stack these yields into our systems in a way in which it reinforces everything else. The soil building, the bee fodder, the gardener, the health of the soil, providing biomass for animals, for mulch, and for our biogas systems. So many of these, many of these acacias also have pods, edible beans, so easy to propagate. So think again about how we could all help each other, preserving seeds and promoting these plants to be incorporated into our permaculture design systems. Now, many people are aware of Artemisia. It's a native to China and Vietnam, so it is an exotic. But I know that it's quite common in East Africa. We grow it here. Sometimes we call it wormwood. It's a perennial woody herb or shrub, 2.5 meters in height, many stemmed, aromatic, with soft, dark green, finely divided leaves. It grows in plain soils from 1,000 to 1,500 meters in altitude. It's a very common cultivated medicinal plant in Asia, Africa, and elsewhere. So we can use it as a hedge, and we can use it medicinally. It's very, very bitter. We call it wormwood, and people used to make a tea out of it and ingest it to get rid of worms, of endo parasites. So decoction from the leaves is taken for gastrointestinal indigestion, loss of appetite. It is very effective as a vermifuge, parasitic worm killer, and an emetic. That means it clear you out. It can cure, widely used as anti-malarial herb, and it can cause cerebral malaria, which can be very, very dangerous. I think this is a plant that we should have within our, within our gardens, within our sort of pharmacology, aware of it and have access to it if we can. Let's think about how we, as we move forward into this course, let's think about how we could work together to make sure we all have access to these incredibly useful plants. Here's one. Neem. Another one of those plants that gets a lot of things said about it. So, Azadiracha indica from my C family. The neem tree. Muarubaini. A hardy, fast-growing tree up to 20 meters in height, with dense, leafy, oval-shaped canopy, evergreen except in the driest areas. Has dark, grooved, grey-brown, shiny leaves. Flowers creamy white. So the neem tree is used for timber, for furniture, for poles, utensils, pestles and mortars, hardwood, fuel wood, charcoal, medicine, fodder for animals, bee forage, shade, ornamental, soil improvement, windbreak. There's a neem oil from the seed, and it's a powerful insect anti-feedant. Okay, and you can make soap from it. I think in India they make toothbrushes from it. People chew it as an antiseptic. So another fantastically useful plant with multiple uses that can be integrated into productive systems. So the insecticidal properties all right, getting all scientific on me, responsible for the anti-malarial activity of the plant. The plant also produces phenolics such as gallic acid and epicatechin, which inhibit inflammation. The methanol and aqueous extracts of this plant have all sorts of different uses. Hey, this is getting complicated. Nursery seedlings are raised from seed, or neem is propagated vegetatively by air layering. Cuttings grafted and tissue culture. Direct sowing can be undertaken, but may result in poor survival in drier zones. Neem wildings are an inexpensive source of planting material. So by wildings, we mean where you've seen the seeds have dropped and they've germinated, in the wild by themselves. We can transplant them when they're young. So neem is a prolific seeder, but seed availability is frequently a problem. The viability of fresh seed decreases rapidly 2 weeks after collection unless it's stored correctly. Okay. We have to keep the seeds cool to store them for a long time. Okay. I know there's a great nursery in Ginger where you can get plants like this. Again, is within our Academy network. We should be really assured. We should be sort of building up a list of essential plants that we look after and propagate and can make available for each other. So the desert date, Othu and Luo, Musongole, is that in Luganda? Help me, Gerald. But yes, here we go. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all of these. We can see. Look.
It's in Uganda.
Thank you. The Natal plum, simple spined carissa, an evergreen shrub. Look, all of these plants have multiple uses, can be used in malaria treatment and can be integrated into these systems. Look, this goes on and on. This is what I mean about this amazing knowledge of Najma Durrani and her ability to make this very accessible. Oh, erythrina, I recognize this from Zimbabwe. Growing all the way in the mountains there. A deciduous tree with a short trunk, thick spreading branches, rounded crown, black, yellowish brown, thick, corky, tissued with woody spines. Timber to make doors, furniture, beehives, carvings, utensils, fuel wood, medicine, human and veterinary, bee forage, ornamental, a mulch, all that. So many uses. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that beautiful? And I know that the seeds of this, they were common jewelry as well, I've seen used. And so it has antiplasmodial activity, several tetracyclic, strong alkalines known as the erythrinin alkalines have been reported from the seed, the root, and the flower of the Erythrina species. Typical compounds isolated from the roots, blah, blah. So, yep, we can propagate it and we can grow it. And on we go. What a wonderful resource. I've placed this on our website. The Cape Mahogany, look. Bitterleaf Vernonia. Many different families. So I think we need to focus on a few and think about how we can work with these incredible plants. And consider how they can contribute in so many different ways. I'm before I just headlong dive straight into the next topic, let's just take a little bit of pause and maybe something with you, Gerald. But what experience do you have with working with anti-malarial plants and medicines, and do you have any experience or advice you'd like to share with us? Yeah, Gerald, starting with you, but I'd love to hear from anyone else. Any of those plants that you recognise, or any others you'd like to tell us about?
Lots of them, including the bitter leaf. I grew up personally up to the age of about 15. I hadn't taken these antimalarials, and I took them at 15 because that's when I moved to the city, or to the city for further education. But then, and they were really, it's not theoretical, they are effective, especially if the body is not yet, developed that resistance, because obviously with the modern medicines comes resistance. That's a known factor. And then, so still to take us back, if you're using those, obviously in a combination with boosters, which booster is already your moringa, you have, a stronger body to fend off. The other property with them, they are quite bitter, but really effective. If anyone has tested Artemisia, it's one other one, and really very effective. Caroline, your hand is up. Please unmute and contribute.
Okay. Yes, I've used Artemisia, bitter aloes, and ajuga. They are very effective. Ajuga remota, very good.
Thanks,
though very
Carol.
bitter.
Actually, from my experience as a kid, you had to take it on the equivalent of gunpoint, but then it was worth it. I don't regret it. Anyone else? Anyone with, thanks, Caroline. Simon?
Yes. Hi to everyone. The anti-malarial drug that are commonly used here in Uganda, most especially the Iteso people, is aloe vera. It is quite very effective on that note, and the funny bit of it is it is being bitter, but when you take it, it really helps you to quicken in the healing up of malaria. And then the other one is it is also useful in cleansing the stomach, more so when you have got some germs in it. It stops it from having that aching. That is the aloe vera. And then I grew up when my grandparents used it as the one that can remove toxins when you are being bewitched. So aloe vera has got series of them, and also it helps in the control and preventing the coccidiosis in the birds. And then the other one is the blackjack. Blackjack is also very nutritious thing, whereby it is seeds and leaves are used as tea leaves. The tea leaves of blackjack mixed with the ones of lemongrass, really it will give you very nice, delicious tea, and also helps in the prevention of malaria. And then the other one is of wounds. Blackjack helps in stopping blood flow quickly from your body, mostly when you cut it. And those fresh wounds, the blackjack really works on it effectively. What else should I talk of?
Wow.
I think what I can say.
Thanks, Simon. You know, that's the beauty with permaculture. I was talking to one of the groups and I told them one other wonderful aspects with permaculture is the utilization of indigenous knowledge. And indigenous knowledge is one of the key pillars of permaculture. There you are, you have Simon, he has the whole list. Back to you, Steve. Is there anyone? Deborah? Stella? All right, back to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you everyone for those contributions. Really fascinating. And again, I think, yeah, think about that combination of knowledge and then the plants themselves and knowing how to use them, and then how to combine them into growing systems, and see how all of those ones that we looked at had multiple uses. So to stay with our theme of eliminating waste, we're not just growing the plant for the leaves or the bark. We've got firewood, we've got charcoal, we've got these medicinal yields as well. So and we can also think about how we can use that to support the health and increase the nutrition of our animals. We get better quality manure and better quality compost and so forth. So again, we're thinking about how we are working to nourish the whole system and to value each component. So, in each way that each, say, one of these elements might contribute in many different ways. And I think again is, to go back to the moringa story, this tends to be the development, or the more Western way of thinking about it is, we just focus on one thing, one aspect of it, and we're just going to do that and discount all of the other aspects because we're just interested in making money, making a product export, or making a product energy or something like that. So in permaculture, we're very interested in harvesting the whole yield, understanding the multiple benefits, and understanding how that element might contribute to the whole system, including you and your health. So yeah, great, interesting stuff there. I found this document today and I was reminded that I had it. So, and I'm just thinking that it might be relevant to look at this now. And again, I will include this in the page as a download on the webpage. We're going to think just a little bit now about integrated pest management, which we have touched on already. A lot of these subjects we want to keep coming back to and deepening our understanding of it. So this is a document that was the first edition. I don't know if there's been subsequent ones, it may well have been, about the impact of the fall armyworm in Africa. And it's a guide to integrated pest management. Um, let's see, do we have a date on this? Don't see that. 2018. Okay, so so the fall armyworm, as I understand it, I think it originates in the Americas, and by 2016 it had turned up in Africa, and it's having a rapid spread and inflicting all sorts of damage across multiple crops. The first thing to say, somewhere there's a list of the crops that are susceptible to it, but it's very many. Certainly maize, millet, sorghum, important food crops. Maybe I'll find that part. Number one in our integrated pest management is know your pest, and understand that insects have a life cycle and they take different forms, do they not? So here we are seeing the egg mass on a swollen stem or leaf in the early stage of a maize plant. If we're able to make interventions, the earlier we make that intervention, the more impact obviously that's going to have. We can squish those eggs and we can stop them from developing. But the egg mass hatches in 3 days after it's been deposited. And very quickly we see the little black-headed larvae, and then there is we're seeing these growth stages where they grow from 1 millimeter to 45 millimeters, and distinguishing marks that we can see with their facial markings and the stripes. And they then retreat into a pupae and come out as the fly, as the moth, which then can go on and spread that life cycle. So one of the first steps in integrated pest management is being a keen observer and spotting, try and anticipate and spot problems before they come along, before they become too established. All right. Fall armyworm has a very wide host range, 80 plants recorded, but it clearly prefers grasses. The most frequently consumed plants are field maize, sweet maize, sorghum, Bermuda grass, grassweed such as cabbage grass, so they can multiply up around you. Now, I understand is that vetiver is repellent to it, that actually it's too repellent, is too strong a plant for it. So the principles of IPM, the goal of integrated pest management is to economically suppress pest populations using techniques that minimize harm to the environment, including people. Because of its holistic nature, the need to integrate a variety of techniques and disciplines. IPM should not be seen as an off-the-shelf solution, but it requires the farmer, the gardener, the agriculture person to have knowledge and implement an effective program based on local farming conditions. So we want to have healthy plants so that healthy plants can better at resisting pest attack. If we can promote biological controls, understand the life cycle of the pest, and can we find other predator species that might help regulate that population, and can we create hopefully biopesticides, non-invasive or toxic pesticides, also to control the spread. So we're kind of coming at it from 3 different angles. We're going to have healthy plants, we're going to try and promote the conditions for predators, and we're going to have our own arsenal of strategies in place as well. And The IPM framework has several key objectives: to prevent or avoid pest infestations using a combination of environmentally friendly approaches at the field, farm, and landscape scale, such as cultural controls, landscape management, host plant resistance, biological controls. Yeah, look, it's in here. So it is a constant process of surveillance, monitoring, and being aware. Our plan is always to not make it easy for the pest species to find the target plants. One way to do that is to mix them up. Again, back to permaculture, is let's move away from monoculture. Let's not have large areas of a single type of plant. If this fall armyworm attacks the grass family, can we interspace them with other kinds of plants? Can we have, so again, having alley crops of moringa or of neem, of other plant, tree crops we've been learning about. Think about how that makes it much harder for the insects to spread. Let's see, what else have we got in here? We can use traps, and there are pheromone traps that can be used, and this can be a good way for monitoring. So pheromone, obviously, is a hormone that creatures use to attract the opposite sex, and we can bait traps with that. And we can, obviously, in the flying stage of the fall armyworm, we can have something like this bucket trap with the pheromone, and we can at least know in advance that whether they're there, and know whether how much we need to be monitoring, we need to be paying attention, and understanding the life cycle of the creature, and where our plants might be vulnerable to it, and how they might display those vulnerabilities if they've been attacked. Yeah, look, we can see with such visible signs in plant, and again, it just seems to be constantly telling us to observe. And then here we have action threshold for small farmer, action threshold for village level progression. If we see a certain amount of presence, then we need to leap into action and make a safe spray, no spray processes. Look, there's a series of actions that we can respond. I'm always very anti-pesticides because I feel that they unbalance ecosystems, but there might be ecological or non-toxic ones that can be used. And obviously we always have to understand the level of risk and the context that we're working in. So I'm not pretending to be an expert in this. There's obviously a lot of elements to it. But here is the document, and something else that there may be local knowledge, and you might have some experience on, and I think this sense of getting priority and strategy that comes from integrated pest management, and that sits very much within our permaculture thinking. Gerald, I wanted to incorporate that because I know it's important, and I know that where people are suffering from this, they suffer greatly. Anything you would like to contribute on that topic whilst we're here?
You've been exhaustive, but it was one of those things that caught people so unaware, even in the midst of so many chemicals and everything. It was something so new, and a great test to the resilience of the conventional farming systems. Apparently, I don't want to take the political stand, but lots of money was, heavily invested in that and spent and everything. But it's always interesting to know that they are always simple but effective, natural or permaculture-based methods. And then also it takes us back as we do everything that we do. Let's look at how best do we build the resilience of the system in that even in the case of unprecedented shocks or shocks that we least expected, at least the destruction is not as massive as it was. Otherwise, it was really, really sad. It was overwhelming, especially for the farmers who basically relied on those produce on the produce for their, day-to-day livelihood and survival.
Yeah, I'm just thinking again how, reinforced by what you're saying, it's this whole system response that we're interested in. So look, once you go down the pesticide route, you're spending money, you're buying in non-local resources, and then you're throwing poison, which is actually going to also kill anything that might predate on the fall armyworm or those eggs. If you kill the pest, you're also going to kill its predator. Those pesticides, some of them are toxic. I don't know how they impact on the soil, and is that going to impact on the long-term health of the plant, and therefore weaken it in the long term to be predated on. Whereas with our permaculture approach, what we're saying is healthy soil, healthy plants, higher sugar content, more resilience against pests. The pests are likely always go to weaker plants. If we do less monocultures, we break up plots with other types of plants, then suddenly we have a much greater degree of resilience. And we're also not relying also on one crop, because if we do have a failure, we've got a different type of crop to go to. And I think all of those are our key ideas within, IPM. So again, we're valuing every part of the system and understanding that by the stronger the system is, the more resilient it becomes in itself.
Yes, Steve. Actually, you've just mentioned something. One of our of the so-called scientists came up and they were proposing aerial sprays, but then to some extent, you're suggesting aerial spray, which is indiscriminative. And then it so happened that at that same time, the weather was pretty windy. So you can imagine what the impact could be then. So as Steve said, it's about building resilience, and also some of these things which that we've been talking about, the push and pull systems, sacrificial planting, and overall, staying off the monoculture path are really key to, preventing or even mitigating the risks in such cases. Stella has her hand up.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that session, Steve and Gerald. Personally, I participated in the collection of that data for the Feed the Future in 2018, and that was in Northern Uganda. A lot of people were not happy with why they were given those seeds, those chemicals, because it was a project for them. They were aiming at increasing yields, and they called it value-added chain crops. So they were looking at the maize, the beans, sorghum, coffee, and so on. So you realize that it created a lot of issues for those people at that time. And people were left in dilemma. They really didn't know what to do next, you know? And at the end of the day, they started lamenting why were we given these things? Our indigenous crops were okay. They were not affected by these things. They were able to stand the drought. Even if the pests attacked, it wouldn't attack to this level. But I'm really so happy that Caroline and the team are really trying to fight so hard because of recent, they just introduced them that system of getting them also GMOs. But I saw Caroline with a lot of local seeds and so on, trying to grow them again. I should say big ups, Caroline, because that is the way to go. Before we think of getting a pest management system, we should first of all look at the seeds we have also. You know, they help us a lot decide the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stella. There's a lot to be said about seeds and local seeds, and yeah, and what you're saying is, as well, is again, with that sort of limited sort of Western way of thinking, is we're maybe only interested in the yield, in the you know, how much kilos per hectare we get, rather than thinking of the overall plant health, nutritional density, resistance to pests, resistance to diseases, resistance to droughts. And again, is obviously, if we're working with traditional local varieties, then we can save the seeds and promote the seeds and select and varieties as well. So if we always are selecting the seeds from the healthiest, strongest plants, we will actually improve the variety. So another very important thing to bring into our attention about using and valuing natural resources and services and eliminating waste. We think about how these things really go together, and how, by understanding that, we can build much more resilient, stronger, resistant kinds of systems. So yeah, all good stuff. So thank you for that. I think I'm gonna go. We've got a little bit more time, a little bit of time left, and I'm going to tell a different kind of story, I think, this time, or a different kind of topic, and there's a slight squeeze to fit into the produce no waste, but there's a relationship still, and I'm going to go with this. Let me just check if I haven't skipped something that I'd planned. Biogas, fall armor, anti-malaria, moringa. Okay, great, good. Okay. Actually, back to Zoom. Oh, wait, okay, share screen. So back to today's page on the website, and here it is. And I've tried to avoid giving you loads of videos to follow because I'm aware of the bandwidth that it uses. But I've added, I've put some video links on today's page because I've just to broaden the topic out. The first one, this compost, a UPO, Eastern Uganda Permaculture member, demonstrating a really interesting composting technique, in which, on a visit this time there last year, together with Stella and Deborah, we witnessed this, and this guy has excavated a hole and then made clay from the soil, compacting the soil, to line the hole, and then put his compost in it, and then put the soil back, and then planting his crop into it, so that he's created a really sort of nutrient dense and contained environment that will also hold water. So I thought I've not seen, I thought it was very innovative. So I invite you to have a little look at that. And I think it's really great to, go back to observe and interact, to keep playing and experimenting. And this guy had developed a technique that he felt was really working for him, and he was going with that. And he was also adding his biochar to his compost and building localized fertile spots in his garden. There's lots of gardening programs on TV, especially here in the West. There's lots of video YouTube gardeners as well. And I wanted to just share with you this guy, Hugh Richards. He's a Welsh guy, and he's permaculture. And he's been making videos. He started doing this when he was quite young. I think he was a teenager, and before YouTube was kind of a thing. And he's built himself quite a following. And so he's now making very good quality videos about growing food on a sort of a household scale using no-dig permaculture methods. So if you, and okay, it's a temperate climate, so you've got to translate those ideas a little bit to suit where you might be, but he's got a good approach, and you might find it really enjoyable. And the third one I added was a little video that we edited of a practical that we did in 2018 in Sanjay on our 2018 PDC 5 years ago, and of a banana guild practical. So that's a guild of species coming together with a shaped landscape to hold water, to harvest rainwater. So yeah, and then a nice little quote from Ali. So yeah, there was an element on today's page, which is, I just wanted to show you. And then with a little bit of time left, I was going to take you down this alleyway and tell you a little bit about how I got into this, and what sort of my permaculture design process going back some years, and it starts with this image, and in the late 1980s, so a long time ago, I really wanted to get out of the UK. I wanted to get away and experience other aspects of the world, and I felt I understood a lot of what I was frustrated with, what I felt was kind of wrong, or about what was unsustainable about our society and culture. But I didn't have a sense of what I knew what I didn't want, but I knew what I did. I knew what I didn't want, but didn't know what I did want. So that was a series of events that led me to doing some traveling, and ended up living and working in Zimbabwe, where I came across permaculture on a farm there, and ended up getting to see lots of different permaculture projects in Zimbabwe, and actually doing some training. And it sort of gave the direction to my life. And I when I came back to the United Kingdom, 1992, I wanted to live inside permaculture. I wanted to bring those ideas here. I had no money. I had no sort of resource. I'd been out of the country for a few years, so I didn't had no idea how I was going to do it. When I came back, I stayed. So this is about produce no waste. In big old cities like where I had been a student, city of Reading, there was old buildings that weren't being used. Maybe they were originally built for one function. Times had changed, and now they're not being, they were trying to be sold or seen for redevelopment. And just at that time in the 1992, there were empty buildings in Reading, and groups of people occupied some of them, and we put them to use. And we managed to negotiate with the owners of the buildings to, maybe have a temporary use. And inside one of this empty building, I ran a cafe, a whole food cafe, for 2 years. I managed to save a little bit of money. I moved to Wales, fringe, to a part of the country where there's not much work. It's very rural, and land and buildings are relatively cheap because they're kind of almost in the waste stream. What's happened to farming in the UK, and you'll see it happening in your country, is farms have got bigger, with machines, with inputs. Farms have either grown and grown, or they've shrunk and they've died. What we're looking at here was one of those farms that had died. We're looking at, there's a farmhouse, a series of what were cattle barns. And looking into the history, this used to have about 30 or 40 acres of land. I don't know what that is, about 15 hectares or something like that. And maybe 100 years ago, 120 years ago, that was enough land to be able to make a living and have a family and so forth, here in this part of Wales. In the modern times, no. And so what had happened was the farmer had got old and died, and the land had been sold off, and no one really knew what to do with the buildings. And what we're looking at here is a very heavily farmed landscape in the foreground. You'll see these bright green fields. They've been ploughed and they've been sprayed with nitrogen to create very rich grass to fatten lambs, to fatten sheep, to be sold for meat. And that's the business. That's what they do there. Otherwise, it's very low quality soil and you can't produce much in it. You can only really grow grass or trees, and they use these nitrates, fertilizers, which are made from natural gas. So again, it's a carbon. It's a fossil fuel, fossilized carbon source of energy. Anyway, the buildings so the buildings, which was in this plot, came onto the market for sale with a paddock field in front, and that's a pasture field, and then another field which was a wetland, a natural wetland, marshy, boggy, of not really of any agricultural use. So again, all the good land had gone to the farm, had been bought up by the neighbouring farm, and the sort of what was left over was the bit that was for sale. And to anybody else, that might be, you don't want to buy that. But we thought differently because we were into permaculture. We thought about succession. If can we find a use and to create a set of uses for this infrastructure that other people have failed to do? Because if we can see the opportunity that other people can't see, then we can, we can access that resource. So I very much saw this as something that was in the waste stream, a non-economic farm in a remote rural area that other people couldn't see the value of, and yet maybe might just be perfect for permaculture. My original idea really was to fill it full of people. And obviously the problem is where'd you get the money from? How would you buy it? And how could you afford it? And then even if you could persuade a bank to lend you the money, how are you going to pay the mortgage? How are you going to repay the loans that you've taken out? All of that, multiple challenges. The property was on the market for about £165,000 at the time. And it represented a house, a cottage, a little studio space, and a little bungalow. So it was almost 3 or 4 dwellings, but not well maintained and quite rough, and it had never been sort of modernized. It was cold and drafty. I came and looked at it, and I dreamt about how could I fill it full of people, how could I create a vision, a permaculture inspired vision to take hold of this property and bring it to life. It had been empty for 4 years at this time. I had a few short-term residents who'd rented it, but basically, and the price, just because of the timing as well, the price had gone down from 165 to 160, 140, 120, 120, 110. We made an offer for 110,000. And at the time that we made the offer, we only had £10,000 that we'd saved from running our restaurant in this empty building in Reading. And I didn't know how it was ever going to happen. It was a dream. But in the process of researching this, I found out about housing cooperatives. I found out about mutual support, different ways of living, and I realized that the permaculture idea tied all of this together. Now, I was very lucky because the next thing that happened when I was just thinking about this was they decided to hold a full permaculture design course in this same region. There's a very famous environment centre in a place called Permaculture in Wales, here where we are here, called the Centre for Alternative Technology. And they researched a lot of the renewable energy ideas we talked about last week. I learned about that there. And at this environment centre, they decided to hold a PDC in February 1995. And myself and my friend went on that course thinking, well, there's 2 of us. We need to find probably another 6 people. We need 8 people to make this project happen. And we met them all on that PDC. And the power of that was coming together around a common set of values and finding a common vision and a common goal. And it's that process that's always convinced me of how powerful permaculture is. Because if we can bring groups of people together around common ideas, around focusing on meeting our own needs, then there's almost nothing we can't achieve. So this brings us now, edging you into thinking about how we could use permaculture as a set of design tools to build visions about more complex things, like housing cooperatives and farms and projects that might have multiple stakeholders, different people involved in different ways. This project and experience of doing this, so I began in 1995 and I lived there until 2008. So I spent 13 years of my life living at this place, plus 2 years building the vision. So this is 15 years of my life went into this, and it was experience of doing this that led me to become a permaculture teacher, because I realized I'd learned so much in that time by living and working within the permaculture ideas. And that's what I suggest we understand, that that's what we're all doing, right? The more we think about those ethics, keep that as your steering mechanism, and now think about how we can use these principles and ideas to build a vision that is going to be, inclusive and exciting to all of its stakeholders, the people who are going to be involved, shape that project and benefit from it. So we found a derelict farm. The land around it had been stolen, kind of all sold off, and what we had left was a bunch of old-fashioned buildings that's not really any good for modern farming. I've got other versions of the slideshow with more photos in it, but never mind. I want to keep the story simple. So coming off of our permaculture course, and as a group, there were certain ideas that really stuck with us and resonated with us. So we wanted say, we thought about these ethics, and then we like this idea that permaculture begins with observation, and it takes at least a year to do good observation. So don't make big changes early on. Don't feel you have to run in and solve everything straight away. Realize you need protracted and thoughtful observation rather than protracted and thoughtless labor. That work is that hard work, back-breaking work is a symptom of bad design and to be avoided. Can we, instead of seeing problems, can we see we're surrounded by so many opportunities? And that our first thing we need to think about is this catch and store energy, hold water, hold fertility, hold it high in elevation in the landscape, and understand that, yeah, from catching and storing, we can build yields. So we all fizzed with ideas. The 8 people who started this project, we were really excited about ideas like that. And we also understood that we were moving from patterns to details. So we didn't need to clash heads about the minutiae of the project. What we had to do was to see the overarching patterns. We were looking to make the minimum input for the maximum output. We wanted to be locally focused, and we thought a lot about these functions. Every function should be supported by multiple elements, and we're going to choose elements that support many functions. I've given lots of examples of those today, and you could think about how those things might integrate together. So here's our very simple drawing of our land. This is the highest point of the land is here, where these pine trees are. And this is the lowest point here in the wetland. And there was kind of water would kind of come out this way and go down this steep drive. And we saw that we felt that this pasture field had a real potential. So we had a walk around, but the thing that absolutely, so if you decide, so we talked about functions of a design. So I'm going to start, I want to use these terms more so you start understanding them a bit more. The primary function of our design for our housing co-op on this abandoned old farm was that we had to generate enough money through rent to pay the mortgage. That was our plan. We realized we weren't going to suddenly be farmers. It would take us years to earn enough money from crops, from trees, from plants to be able to do that. And that from day one, we were going to have to start repaying the money we borrowed from the bank. If we could provide a business plan that was convincing enough to get that money in the first place. So our primary function was, we've got to pay the mortgage. We need to have 8 people who can pay an affordable rent. And that was the building block. That was the foundation of our plan. Now, for your design, when you come to thinking about your project is, you might have different, primary function. So we had to find a property that we could populate with people and enough people to pay for the mortgage. And then whatever land we got with it was a bonus. We couldn't get choosy about the quality of the land or how much there was. We just had to realize that we had to make the best of what we had. And again, that's permaculture thinking, is how do we turn the resource that we have to its best advantage? So we sat down and we discussed all sorts of different ways, drew pictures and discussed things and things that we noticed. And we did our observation. This plot is quite close to the sea. It's very windy. We got westerly winds coming off, and when we started to try and add things or make changes, or we observed the landscape here, what we realized was everything just got blown away. And most of the time the wind came from the west, but every now and again it came from the kind of the northeast, and it was really cold. When the wind came from this side, it was cold, it would kill plants. When it came from this side, it was sort of wet and windy and stormy. So when we started thinking about our design, we realized we were going to have to grow lots of shelter belts. These were just fields that have been grazed, as you can see from the original picture, there's nothing there. It's really exposed. The wind could just whistle across this. This is the sea behind. This is the sea. All of this around here, it's got its back to the sea really, and the wind would whip off over here, and very hard to establish anything in this field because we would get storms. And so also get these really cold winds come from this side. So we were trying to orientate ourselves, trying to get a feel of how this farm sat in the landscape, of its exposure to the elements. So what we will later on we'll call sector analysis, but we'll come to that. So here we are. So we started to visualize how we might really strengthen the perimeter of the property by having a real mixture of different kinds of trees. We thought about willow, alder, oak, ash, beech, hazel, birch, rowan, damson, holly, blackthorn, hawthorn, different kinds of fruit trees, things that have multiple uses, that perform different functions, good for nature, good for wildlife, for food, for fuel, for medicine. Can we create shelter belts to protect us from these winds coming off the sea? Can we create pathways for wildlife to cross the land? Can we encourage the wildlife to go where we want it to go, and allow it pathways across the land, so rather than seeing it something that might be a problem? Can we understand how there seems to be an issue of water here, and it would ooze across this wetland field? We imagined opening up a pond, having some open water. Another thing we noticed about the property when we observed it was that when we came in, this is the drive-in, this is the way in. You come in your car and you park your car here, and then suddenly you filled up this space in front of the houses with parked cars. Well, let me explain this diagram a little bit more so we're clear what we're looking at here. This is the main house. This had been a stable but converted into a little cottage, and then this had been cattle barn that again been turned into like a little holiday, temporary summer dwelling. This was the agricultural building, just a concrete block building. And these two things here are the septic tanks. So we talked about water treatment systems last week, and that's what we had. We just had a septic tank system, a soak away. Okay. So all of the houses, because the land is steep behind, all of the houses open up into this yard. So these are living spaces, which we might call zone 1 spaces. And then as we come outside, there's this sort of a space where then the occupants, the 8 people who lived in this community, would interact with each other, a zone 2 space. So what we realized early on was it was incompatible to fill that space full of cars. So instead, one of our early decisions was to create a car park over here, out of the way, and to think about how to value these important spaces around the buildings. And the next big decision we need to make was, well, we want to grow food, and we want to have a growing area. And there had been a garden over here, but it was very overshadowed by what trees there was, and it was constricted in space. So we thought, well, one of the things we thought was, especially in a temperate, cooler climate where we are, is the sun is a limited resource. We don't get as much as you in the tropics, and it doesn't go high in the sky, especially in the winter. It stays quite low on the horizon. And so we wanted to be, and we know that the sun rises in the east, which is here, and sets in the west. So the sunniest part of the property actually is all the parts that are facing this way, up here. This is the part that receives the most sun, uninterrupted sun, for most of the year. And the next thing we noticed was the most fertile soil, the deepest soil on the whole property, was on this edge of the field, this field here. So for those reasons, we realized is this would be a good place to locate the intensive vegetable growing areas, because it's as close to the house as we can get it, and on the best soil with the sunniest aspect. So when you start to think about in that terms, you realize, oh, there's a strategy. We have the function of growing food. We want to support that function with multiple elements. One of those elements is going to be food growing area, compost, fruit trees, all of those things. So we're going to have that as close to the house in the sunniest segment. We thought about access. We thought how we get in and off the property. So we talked about, we moved cars from out this home area to over onto this side area. And we realized that this part of the field was going to be where we did our intensive growing, and that we could support that then with more intensive plantings of trees, shelter belts, wind shelter, but not to shade out the areas where we wanted to grow intensively. Here we have an aerial photo 13 years later. 13 years later. Yeah, there we go. So exactly what we planned. This is the residential parts, a nice open circulation space. We had our chickens and other things just here. And then here's our intensive growing areas, surrounded. You can see now the shelter belts are really established, and you can see like in the wetland field, there's our pond. Here's all of our wind shelter belts. Really lovely. The first stage, 10, 12 years in of just, and again, it's what I realized. Permaculture design works if you're consistent over time, and if you put the elements in the right place, and you keep reinforcing them, then the whole system establishes. It was a happy, interesting coincidence, but on the day that this aerial photo was taken, this is before Google Maps, by the way, during our permaculture course, and you can see here, these are the tents of the participants of the course, and up there, trails across the field to and from the teaching areas. So look how we saw the potential in something that maybe other people couldn't see the potential in. We thought about our process and our values and how we were going to approach it. We took a patterns to detail overview of the whole project, but we understood the priority of importance. And we started then to think about how we could place elements into our design that would then reinforce those functions and make them work for us. And as we implemented it slowly, we added detail and we understood it better, and the whole vision moved forward, and it moved forward with a sort of coherence and continuity. And then in subsequent years, we started to look at in more detail areas and sections of the garden and at the edges around the field, and we thought about how we could introduce then more and more detail, more and more precision, understanding the materials that we had lying around on the farm that we could utilize. There's looking with a mulch going on. We've put a stone wall for a bit more protection, a bit of extra heat, compost systems, raised bed systems, windbreak systems. I started establishing more, obviously that garden just coming into the summer, into its full bloom. Remember, this was that bare, windswept field at the beginning. And slowly we're building an ecosystem, building a food forest, layering in medicinal yields, yields for insects and other beneficial elements of the system, fruit trees, yields for humans. So to integrate more things in and around the house, energy features, solar thermal panels. We start paying more attention to growing and experimenting, doing little test beds, involving volunteers and students. This is one of our early PDCs. Many of the really deep friendships and associations that I've developed over my life have been through courses and projects like this. Permaculture draws you in, draws in other interesting people. And look, there's our transformation. There's our from year 1 to year 10. Look how effective the patterning, placement of those elements are. We can still see the solar features, the solar on the roof, the greenhouse area. But we now have all that wind shelter and protection and many layers of productivity, all supporting the key function of having a bunch of tenants live in there and meeting some of their needs, if not all, certainly not all, but some of their needs from what is on the land around them. And there's me going back in 2015, and they've been able to add a bit, more solar features, more porches, solar panels, PVs coming on. So you get the key elements in the right place, and you just then can build and build and build on it, understand the patterns, and as you build grain in momentum, so can you grow. There we go, with 4 minutes left. So there's my little story. That's how I took these ideas, and it was just a catalyst. It completely transformed my life. I suddenly went from being kind of a blow-in to someone who suddenly was part of something, and something which I was my home for 13 years and gave me momentum to go forward and carry on to what I have been involved in subsequently. So, hey, that's my patterns to detail story. So to start, you could think about, perhaps see the potential. If you can think like this and draw, communicate ideas, drawing people to a common vision, hey, all sorts of potential is there. Love to hear any thoughts or reflections or contributions from anyone.
Thank you, Sir Steve Jones, and all participants. I'd want to add on and diseases using or biological measures. Either herbs can be organic pesticides or liquid manure, whereby we have tools. You find tools with examples and some of the methods we can use, like examples of preparations, that is use of garlic and onions, nimu, tomato leaves, lantana, and chili. We talked about aloe vera, that is produce no waste. We talked about produce no waste, that is on the side of preparations. We have aloe vera. Also, we have baking powder. Also, is good as one of the preparation management. And we can talk about the methods. Here we have some of the methods. That is a repelling methods and biological methods. Another one is a behavioral methods of how to control pest and diseases. So that's what I'd want to also to contribute on the side of pests and diseases. But we have much to talk of about the procedures, even the tools or equipment used for making this. What I had also wanted. We talked about produce no waste. We talked about observation and interaction. Observe and interact. Also, we talked about. That's what I'd also wanted to contribute on the side of pests and diseases. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah. And yeah, you're very right. There's a lot of detail to go into about how we use organic pesticides and the methods. And we'll increasingly be looking to you guys for your personal and direct experience of that. And again, I'm introducing the patterns, the concepts, and as we move forward, we need to go into more and more detail. And I really look to your experience as well and everyone else. So yeah, thank you for that. And Simon, please.
Yes, when we are in pest management, basically, we as the permaculture members, there are some of those storage pests after the harvest of the crops, and they are put into our stores. Majorly for us here in Eastern Uganda, we prefer to use the neem tree mixed with red paper and soda ash in the control of the maize weevil, beans weevil, and these thieves majorly. Yeah, the aspect of red paper there, when you're a thief and you go in somebody's grinder, you will be caught, because that red paper will make you sneeze and cough and so what, and you will be caught. And then the other aspect of the indigenous breeds of seeds, majorly some of these seeds are packed with their diseases into those packaging materials, and then they are brought to us. But during our ancestral seeds, they were a bit tolerant to some of these pests and diseases. So it is more effective for one to go in for some of these indigenous seeds other than rushing in for these new crops. So the aspect of lemon, lemon, ginger, and garlic basically helps in the treatment of flu, cough, and cleansing of toxins in the body, as well as scaring those pests from the field and breaking down the life cycles of those pests and diseases in the soil, creating good atmosphere for our crops. And then the other one is on the use of red paper mixed with neem tree mixed with the etoro also helps in the control of the pollen armyworm, which is so dangerous in maize, sorghum, sugarcane, and so forth and so forth. So it is better that we have to integrate each and every system in the permaculture design for us to achieve high and better yields. Thank you.
A
Thanks,
really great
Simon. Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Deborah. It's always, good to be on the receiving end, and always, to receive such detailed or really on-ground information. And as facilitator and co-facilitators, it's always a pleasure to have that feedback. Steve, I think back to you, unless we have anything else from Caroline, Nicholas, and Shinaz. Otherwise, we are about 6 minutes over our end.
Yeah, so nice to see some comments in the chat as well. Yeah, unless this is a burning question, I will wrap up there and say, do save your thoughts and questions and curiosity and your own experience and bring that with you next week. We're going to carry on this theme of Principle 6, but I'm edging us into now to be thinking about how are we going to use these ideas and tools to build our own projects and our own visions and to take forward, what we're already engaged in. So, and I'm really looking forward to that as well. So we're going to move, beyond this theory and into really thinking about how we can apply it. And that's where we're going. So I thank you all for your attention, and I shall bid you all a good night and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Nostra.
Yeah, no stop.